everyone. I'm very grateful to Katerina and to all the team of Mystetskyi Arsenal for your trust for this journey. It wasn't a difficult journey. It was a very happy 4 months, despite all the trauma and all the losses. It was a chance to go back to the times when there was no war and somehow stay there legally to check my archives and my materials, which didn't have such significance back then. And for me it was like a time machine. And from the feedback from this exhibition, I see that it happens with a lot of spectators as well, especially for those who are from Kherson region. Now I would like to share some personal stories that happened during these 4 years. They were not edited in the style of this exhibition. Everyone will have the opportunity to make your own editing. All the stories are about the land that still keep you attached to it. Sometimes it's very irrational, and about coming back as an idea. Sometimes it's very illusionary, sometimes it feels very physical, but somehow it all leads to this. And I would like to start from Starozburivka. So it's in the lower part of the river. It's Dnipro Delta. It's a Cossack village, and which never had kolkhoz. And people remember Cossacks. They remember the river navigators. And all the important decisions are taken collectively by the village in the village club, which used to be a church before it has become club, and it was the biggest wooden building in the left bank of Ukraine. It is the village where the Ukrainian sheriffs appeared. The local citizens, they understood they cannot call police or militia as it was back then. They have elected this two wonderful men to take care of the public security, and in such a way they solved the problem with crime. They almost vanished in their village. In February 2022, police, service security of Ukraine and all other government bodies, people escaped. Everything was closed, and local citizens faced the problem of invasion, and there was no one to take care of them. And the people in the village started sharing the most necessary things, which are the food, drugs, etc. The owners of the shops would just take out the products outside the shop. The fishermen also would bring the fish, and for 2 weeks the village was functioning in such a regime of mutual help and support. Russians were trying to occupy all of the southern part and ultimately all the Ukraine. When they were stopped near Mykolaiv, they understood they will not manage that, so they will go back, and they were trying to occupy the villages they went through. Of course, they were looking for the Ukrainian forces, warriors, soldiers. They came to the house of one of the sheriffs, Victor. He's wearing glasses in this picture. He managed to escape, but his house was destroyed. Victor escaped to the cemetery. He was hiding at the cemetery. This is the cemetery in the village. He dug out the grave. He put the flowers, artificial flowers he collected from other graves, and he was hiding in this grave at daytime, and at night he was going to the neighbors to have some food and to rest a little bit. And in 2 or 3 weeks he looked like a homeless man. He had a long beard, his clothes looked terrible, so he just went to Kherson. Through all the blog posts, no one would recognize him because he doesn't look like himself anymore. Then Russians started to settle in the houses, and they would take away everything from people, like boats, cars, tools. They occupied the house of my relatives. We lived in this house while we were filming Ukrainian sheriff's films. And there was the first rotation of this military personnel. They took out everything, including washing machine and sanitary units. And the next rotation, they were looking immediately for washing machines and sanitary units they could take out. Then the local people found a way to give coordinates of the houses where the Russians were occupying. So the Russians had to go to the forest and dig the holes in the ground to live in. But local people didn't hurry to abandon the village. They were staying because they had their gardens there. They would plant the vegetables. They needed to take care of them, and they would continue to do it. It was their sense of life. It's a sense of life in the village, having a harvest. And despite having gas and electricity, there were still 10 families staying in the village, growing vegetables in their gardens and greenhouses, and we don't even know how they were able to irrigate it. Right now, this village is on fire. The dry grass is burning. The houses are burning because of the drone attacks. There is still one family continuing to take care of their greenhouse. There are some people with children who continue to live there, and one boy, he graduated from Ukrainian school online. His father did an antenna to catch Ukrainian satellite, and he even managed to enter the Ukrainian university. Now he's studying in Kyiv, and he managed to graduate from the school in the occupation. On the 24th of August this year, the drone hit the club, which was the biggest wooden building of the left bank of Ukraine, as I told you before, and the club got burned, and the church got burned as well. Both sheriffs, Volodymyr, he is in the Ukrainian armed forces. This is how the club and church looked like. At the exhibition, you can see a picture and artwork with this club from our diaries. So this is the sons of Viktor and Volodymyr. They now are also in the army, in the assault units. In the film, back in the film, they are like about 11 years old. Now they are adults. Mykola Mykolaievich is one of the main characters of the documentary, who had this dream to be the master at his father's house. And in the film, he has stolen the bike, and there was a court, but he wasn't sentenced. Unfortunately, he died because of the mine. After torture that he underwent during the occupation, he still was in touch with people from the village, and everyone was saying that they saw the world, but they didn't find their land anywhere. And the main idea of their calls was that without Russians, they would be ready to live there, even like in tents, as long as it was in the village they were born in. Then downstream we have Kherson. This is a symbol of the Soviet glory, the comrade ship. During the full-scale invasion on the wall of a high-rise building where my mom used to live
there was a mural with a ship and was commissioned by then a candidate for the position of the mayor of Kherson, and now a traitor and collaborationist, Volodymyr Saldo, and he wrote down there, "I love Kherson," and added a QR code to his campaign. This building was targeted multiple times. Now it looks like a caricature for this nostalgic symbol of the Soviet period, and the electoral campaign itself, there is a hole at the level of the 7th floor from a grenade or a tank. I think there is no one staying in the building anymore. I think everyone left. We tried to move our family photo albums multiple times. We tried to retrieve them, but Russians recently blew up the bridge to the main part of the city, and we had to postpone the rescue of our family memory. But in addition to the albums, we had a lot of house plants. Bigger plants froze, but the smaller plants, watered by my mom's friend Tamara, survived. And after every strike, she would come in and put chipboard over the window, but she left a hole so that the plants would still get some sunlight, and thus they survived until the summer, until the forced evacuation, and everyone had to leave the area. And then we asked Tamara to just take these plants, these geraniums, and take them outside and to take a picture for us to remember them. This is what they look like in the street. But later some residents found a way to go back to their area, to their neighborhood. They started walking on the railway bridge or even using boat, and they came back to retrieve their items and to water the plants. And we know that the geraniums are still alive, and people water them when they water their flowers as well. When the evacuation from the area started, it was announced to local residents that there would be no power, water, or gas. And in chats, people started uniting into communities and launched a campaign to get power and water back. And surprisingly, in the moment and in a city where this activism seems out of place, leaders emerged who started demanding something, who started making life around them more comfortable and better. Power is on for a few hours during the day. Water also comes back on for a few hours. Gas is not there, but they promise to bring it back by winter. But these horizontal ties are very similar to the principles that used to act before, when the decisions are made by the community rather than being forced from above. My parents-in-law were building a house on the riverbank. It was their dream home, and they were very proud of it. So they stayed there to defend it, to make sure that nobody would squat there. And after the dam was blown up, the house was underwater for 2 weeks, and people called and asked us, why are you still there? Why are you not leaving? They said, well, there are still some plants. There is a rose bush. There are apple trees. We're going to take care of them. And it was impossible to live in the house anymore. They moved to an apartment, but every day at 5 in the morning, they would wake up and follow a tractor of the utility services to the area. They would mask the car with branches so it wouldn't be visible from a drone, and they would go to save their rose bushes and their apple trees. My wife's father even went fishing to his regular place between tents at the Dnieper River, and he brought that fish feeling proud, saying, "This is my land, nobody's going to chase me out of here, I'm going to live here like I used to." Later, the structure of utility services was struck by a drone, and my parents-in-law personally witnessed it, and they started coming there more rarely. They tried to, but it was more difficult. Another thing about the flood, when the water started, my father-in-law couldn't get the cats out of the apartment, and I came there to help him look for the cats because they hid somewhere. So I came there, we found the cats, we put them in baskets, and we found that a lot of neighbors were still living in the house, that volunteers who went there to get them, they just asked the volunteers to bring them food, cigarettes, bread, and the atmosphere was kind of similar to a summer camp. There was no sadness, there was no despair, people reading books, people were walking to see each other on the roof because it was easier than swimming. They set up collective kitchens and balconies, and they were cooking together. And overall, by the way, this is the frying pan from this very balcony. Overall, they were reading, they were discussing what they read. People finally met each other in a multi-story building. On the same evening, I went to the dry part of the city and went to the store of a local brewery. And I asked, "Do you guys have some kind of beer?" And they said, "What do you mean some kind of beer? We have 12 types as usual." I was very surprised because drinking water was then brought in by bottles of humanitarian aid, and these guys were keeping their brewery running just to do their job well, and that way to resist where they could. A couple of weeks after the water finally subsided, a neighbor was walking his dog next to the building, and he was killed by a landmine. The dog survived, unlike the neighbor, and his wife came over to my relatives with the dog in memory of her husband. I am now following an architect from France, Martin Dupondier, and he's working on projects of post-war recovery of cities. He is meeting up residents of Kherson. He puts a large map in front of them and asks the residents to remember the places that were near and dear to their heart, where they liked being, or where something important happened to them. And the majority of responses was, of course, next to the river, because the city was built around the river and the whole life was taking place on that river bank. Of course, logically, like in pragmatic context, you need to conserve that part, you need to retreat, you need to build a fortress in the part that remains, using all the possible innovations, all the possible means of protection, reduce the square area, reduce the number of people who are staying there. But can you convince local residents to leave their areas voluntarily? And will this new city remain Kherson? Nobody knows that, because in people's memory it is what it is now, or what it was like before the war. Overall, all the most remarkable moments were happening not on the river itself, but in summer houses, dachas, because every other family had a summer house on the tiny islands next to Kherson. They could have a boring job, but after work they would go to their summer house and build tree houses, build boats, fish, compete, and who will grow more grapes or who will grow the biggest tomato, watermelon. Thank you. This is those summer houses in the horizon. These are my parents who grew the largest tomatoes and the largest grapes. They are in the room right now. Alla Mykolaievna, Leonid Vasilyevich, they are here. Alla Mykolaievna is the co-author of a script, and my father is also an author of a newspaper that is featured here at the exhibition. There are a lot of residents of Kherson who went to their summer houses at the beginning of the war because emotionally it was more comfortable, and they imagined the war would be over in 2 or 3 weeks. They thought nobody would get there because there was no road there. We heard from official channels that the war would be over very soon, and it turned out that place wasn't quite as safe. Food started running out very quickly, as well as medication, gas. People from other summer houses started joining them by boat because some of the isles were on fire, so they were running away from that fire. They would get together in those small houses and start discussing whether it made sense to open empty houses looking for food. And eventually this place became much more dangerous than Kherson itself. My parents were able to leave in time, but my friend Mystetskyi, artist and director of the Kherson Modern Art Center, wasn't able to leave. He went to his summer house to hide, and he went missing during the occupation of Kherson. During the flood, all these summer houses of Kherson residents were washed off into the water reservoir, together with all the property. You can see it in the pictures. In 2024, we came to Kherson with the filming crew to work on a satire movie about regional elections, regional press, a mayor who is campaigning while in coma. And we wanted to show this to local journalists, to our friends, people who were participating in the episodes. We wanted to get their feedback. And this was done in a shelter. There were explosions outside non-stop. Nobody really paid attention. And the main feedback from people who were living there at that moment was that everybody was talking about us when there was the flood, and now we feel abandoned. We don't have jobs, there is no attention to us. We barely get any humanitarian aid. Just please share what is happening here. There were a lot of stories about packs of dogs that went wild and were running around areas, just not letting people even leave their houses in the evening. Journalists did seem very united. There were 3 media remaining. They were happy they didn't have to compete during local elections. They hoped there wouldn't be local elections for a long time. And despite access to high-quality journalism, in conversations and in chats, we saw a lot of links to astrologists and fortune tellers, and they were all promising Russia would fall in 2 or 3 weeks. So people kept building their plans and staying in the city based on that information. Berislav, this is a quote from yesterday's news. All exits from the city are mined. There are not only landmines of the metal type on the roads, but also large explosives which are able to destroy and turn over entire vehicles. The city has been closed for arrival and departure for a long time. After the dam was blown up, civilians could survive in Berislav only sitting in a deep basement, often without food and water. In our project War Archive, which I co-founded and which I work on, it is an initiative that documents and organizes the testimony of the war. There are hundreds of stories by volunteers who were evacuating residents of Berislav on some non-existent roads under explosions. And there are a lot of scary stories there. They killed a gardener when he was cutting up trees. A hospital was destroyed by an aerial bomb. There were archaeological digs showing that the entire Russian historical narrative is untrue. People had no other choice but to leave and go abroad. Now, traveling with my movies abroad, I meet a lot of people who come from that part of Ukraine. And actually, recently I had a screening in London, and I saw a viewer who asked me about Olivka, because her grandparents were there, and she had a picture where she was sitting on the sculpture of a dragon. And she asked me if I perhaps knew where this place was. Coincidentally, I did have a picture of that dragon on me. It was made by local enthusiasts. Like, there was a whole park of these quaint sculptures. This dragon is also part of the exhibition. You can look at him. These flashbacks are now very valuable for all of us. The village mayor of Starasburivka, who is writing a book about the village, asked me to send screenshots of whatever I can find from the village, what the locals looked like, what local establishments looked like, just to preserve their memory and to be able to restore them first in your mind and then perhaps physically as well. This exhibition is part of a mosaic that was created from my stories, from the materials of our exhibition, but this is not exhaustive. So at this conference I urge all of you to share your parts of mosaic so that we can see the biggest possible picture of this land that was damaged and temporarily occupied. Thank you all for your attention.